It's April in the garden, which means that spring season is well and truly here, and with it comes a lot of seed sowing, a lot of caring for seedlings, and then eventually planting them out in the garden when it's warm enough. Here on the Isle of Man, we get our last frost around the end of March, and so I'm pretty sure that we won't get any more frosts. So I have started sowing and planting some things outdoors, and we're gonna have a look at those in just a bit. But first, I want to show you what I've been sowing indoors here in the house, all of my seedlings, and what I'm doing about potting them on and then raising them so that they're nice, healthy plants before they get planted out. We've rearranged our dining room, so turn the table around this way so that I have a little area over here for a plant propagation area. The grow light over here, the top one, you can see underneath that it is absolutely crowded with young plants. Most of these larger plants at the back, these are aubergines, eggplants, and they need to be potted on probably in the next couple of weeks. But I do have some tomatoes here, the indigo, which is a natural dye plant, and a few other things that do need potting on into larger pots. And we'll get to that in a little bit. Last year, I also grew sweet potatoes. And this one here in the front is one that I grew. And I've started growing it on for slips, these little leaves, which I will trim off and grow into individual plants very soon. This one here in the back though, I got this one from the supermarket. This is a purple sweet potato, and I wasn't sure if it would root because some of them are sprayed with anti-rooting hormones or sprays, but I just spotted this morning, look at that, we've got some leaves coming up. Now down at the very bottom of this shelf, I have another grow light. And this is where most of my tomatoes are already growing. I started them off in small pots and then potted them up individually. And they've got nice healthy stems, good healthy leaves. And that's because they've been under this grow light. It's feeding them lots of light energy and I'm keeping them well watered. Most of them are new, I would say, this year. We've got Marmande Super Cozy, I think is what it's called. It's a really big beefsteak tomato. I've also got these ones over here. These are called Ananas Noir. And I got these seeds off of Lucy at She Grows Veg. And they're very colorful when you cut them open. And I'm really, really excited to see if they turn out really nice for me as well. Over here, I have a couple of tomatoes that a friend gave me, and they have a little bit of a head start on the other ones. And then this here is one of a few chili plants that I bought from a chili farm near me. And this is the start of me growing my own paprika spice this year. Over on this table by the window, I have quite a few seedlings growing without any grow lights, without any bottom heats. And these are crops that are a bit more temperate. They don't need as much light and as much heat. And we have things over here like beetroot, and over the edge there's cauliflower, there's cabbage and summer purple sprouting broccoli. And we also have things like kohlrabi, the flat leaf parsley has germinated, green broccoli, so the type that you know as calabrese, the typical broccoli in the supermarkets, spinach, there's some cos lettuce and some mustard here. Now with lettuce, they won't germinate well if it's over 15 degrees Celsius at night. So do keep an eye on temperatures. They'll germinate just fine out in the greenhouse right now. And then back here, this is really interesting. I have a tray of celeriac and celery. You can see really good germination with the celeriac talus. This is a heritage heirloom variety. And you can also see that the monarch, celeriac monarch, is starting to come up too. And then swinging over to the left, there's the very first green shoots of the celery golden self-blanching. You can see some starting to come up there as well. I know that a lot of people have challenges in getting their celery and celeriac to germinate, and the trick is light. These are seeds that need to be able to sense light in order to germinate. So when I sowed the seeds for these, I packed the seed tray full of potting mix, and then I just sprinkled the seeds on top and pressed them in. I didn't cover them with any more potting mix. And then you keep it moist and then wait for them to start germinating. It's nowhere near freezing out here in the greenhouse, and so I've decided to move the spinach and the beetroot and the lettuce and mustard out here to the greenhouse. And over the coming month, this place is going to start filling up like crazy. And towards the end of the month, even the tomatoes will come out here. They won't get planted out in the polycrub until May, but they'll get too big and unwieldy inside, so the greenhouse is where they're gonna live for a good few weeks before I then take them out. I've also brought in some of these young plants that need potting on, and you can see that I've started seeds in quite small pots, and these plants have outgrown these pots, and in some cases, like this lone tomato, it needs a bigger pot because it needs more room to grow its roots. The indigo is massively overcrowded right now. And so I've got some potting mix here that I've made previously, and I showed you how to make this in a YouTube short, and it's pretty easy. It's 4 parts cocoa coir, 4 parts multi-purpose peat-free compost, 1 part perlite, and 1 part really fine vermiculite. And this is a really light and fluffy, great seed mix that is general purpose, and it's great for potting on young plants that need a little bit more nutrients than just something that is 100% core, for example. The first thing that I'm going to pot on is this hot Hungarian wax pepper. So this is the one, well, one of many that will give me some paprika this year. I think a lot of people don't actually clock that. Paprika is basically just dried, pulverized peppers. And there are specific types that you can grow for paprika. And I'm growing 2 types this year because I'd like to give it a go, to try to make my own paprika spice. Now with these, it's really easy. First, I take off the little cloth bag that's around the pot. They say that you can plant these. I've done it before. They don't degrade. They really don't, and they constrict roots. So for me, it's important to take these off before potting them on. Once I take the bag off, I tend to dispose of it. I don't put it in the compost because I don't ever see them break down. So I'll set that aside and just fill up a little bit of this potting mix in a slightly larger container, and I will pot this plant on a good few times, I would say, at least once more before I plant it out in the polycrub. And I'm just going to squish some of this compost down in the crack there, and then top it up and squish it down. With peppers, I don't plant them any deeper than they were growing originally in their little pots. I will repeat that process with the loofah, and you can see that the roots are starting to grow out of the little bag. I gently pull the bag off and around those roots, and they tend to be pretty tough, and then I plant the entire thing into a pot. But now let's separate these tomatoes and plant them into individual modules. These are black Krim tomatoes. I grew them last year, was impressed enough with them that I saved some seeds, and then I just seeded this little pot with just a sprinkle of seeds before I went on holiday vacation to Thailand in February, early March. And look at them. We've got a couple of really strong growers and some smaller ones that are healthy but not as big. With potting these on, you can see that there's roots growing out the drainage hole, but also they've got true leaves. They're the serrated leaves that look like tomatoes rather than these flat seedling leaves. So we don't want to hurt the stems too much. So very gently take the plant out of the pot and then very gently tease this apart. I've got 5 plants over here, so I'm just going to fill up 5 modules here. If there's any little pieces, like these little pieces of stick that sometimes come in the compost that I buy in, then I set it aside. I make compost out in the garden, but when it comes to seed sowing and young plants, I tend to always buy compost. And that's because the compost that I make has potential weed seeds in it. It has natural fungi and microbes that might actually compete with the young plants initially. And so I always tend to get compost that's fairly sterile in that it doesn't have any seeds in it. Okay, those are pretty good. I've not pushed them down yet because what I'm going to do next is make a hole in each, pretty deep, almost to the bottom. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up these little plants and pot them right up to their bottom set of leaves. Tomatoes are one of those plants that will grow roots from anywhere along the stem. And so if you plant them deep like this, then they will grow stronger root systems and give you healthier plants. So we've got that one in. This next one here, all the way to just below the bottom set of leaves, and then squish it down. And you will be so surprised to see how quickly these grow. Which brings me to my seed sowing schedule and seeds that I'm sowing now and seeds that I'm holding off on. Last year I spoke to you about the importance of sowing seeds at the correct time for your garden and making a seed sowing calendar. And this is mine, and this is the month of April. I've got it divided into 3 different sections: the beginning, the middle, and the end. And I stick to this as best as I can, because if you sow seeds too early and you have to keep them in the house for much longer than they need before you can plant them out, then they get stressed. Then they don't produce, they're not healthy vegetables. And if you sow too late, then you don't get a crop. And so finding out the optimum time to sow particular crops for your region, or say your garden in particular, is a really important task when it comes to developing your vegetable growing skills. Now, I've made a big note at the top of April because I know now that we're not going to get a frost. Touch wood. There are always exceptions, but in general, our last frost date is the last day of March. And so I can start thinking about sowing more seeds outdoors, about being able to be more confident about planting young plants like lettuces and mustards outside without them getting touched by frost as well. And I can see here that we are just here at the beginning, and I can sow everything from March except for celeriac. So celeriac, it's past its time now because it needs a really long time to develop that big root. So beetroot, leeks, which I sowed last week and are already up. Leaf beet, so I need to sow perpetual spinach, also chard. When I do these tours, I usually start the walk at the top of the garden, but look at how beautiful that morning light is. Let's start here at the bottom because we've actually been doing quite a bit down here. I'll get over to what that plastic is in a second, but first I've got all the potatoes planted. Josh and I came out here and we've got 4 rows down here, and these are mainly first early and second early. We've got Red Duke of York, Pentland Javelin. I've also got a row of Annabelle, which is a second early. And then this row here, these are actually main crops. They're both purple potatoes, black vitelette, and then I believe it's salad blue that I have just down there, a short row. They're purple potatoes that I have saved. And I also saved my own seed for the Red Duke of York. I saved it from last year at the bottom of the fridge and have replanted it out because I read recently that the area that I live, so northern Britain, it's relatively safe to save your own potatoes, that the potato diseases that a lot of people have don't really strike the potatoes here as much, so we'll see what happens. Up here, I've done 2 rows of main crop. This is King Edward at the top. And then I had a spare purple potato, so I've put it there. This black plastic down here on the grass is serving 2 purposes. First of all, it is suppressing the grass underneath, and this is going to be the final growing area in the veg patch. The second thing it's doing is it is serving as a nursery bed for wildflower seeds. And we've put down a kind of a seedling fabric and covered it with compost, and then seeded it with seed that I got from the Manx Wildlife Trust. And they are running a trial right now for local wildflower seed mix that they hope to give out or make available to the public. And as part of the trial, I have to grow on these fabric strips and then transplant them. And they're going to be going up there on the bank. You remember how I said that we've had our last frost already? Well, it is April, and apparently this is going to be our last frost. It's just a very light touching of frost in just some places here in the garden. Everything else seems fine though. Hopefully that is our last, because spring needs to start for us soon. The raspberries are starting to come up. You can see lots of foliage starting to appear. These are the summer fruiting raspberries all along here with this new trellis, which looks great. And if you'd like to build it, I have a video showing how we built it as well. Both the autumn fruiting raspberries and the trellis that I brought from the allotment are doing really well. And you can see that there's actually a lot more green growth on these ones. They're older and stronger plants. These are the same Joan J raspberries that I've been harvesting from the allotment for years. And unlike the summer fruiting raspberries, which are over there, these ones fruit on first year wood. So the canes that are starting to grow right here, they'll grow up and then produce berries on those canes that grow this year. Whereas with the summer fruiting ones, I'm going to have to wait until next year to harvest from them. Now up here in the main veg patch, we've got lots of signs of spring, and everything from blossoms on the trees to fresh green growth. That lovely green that only comes with these first months of spring. It is incredible. Over along here, I've been planting out some sprouted seeds. In this end, let's see if we can spot any. Oh yes, there's a couple there. We've got parsnips, and I pre-sprouted the seeds in a little takeaway container. And look, there's one that's starting to come up as well. This bed is completely filled with parsnips. And in the past, I've had trouble with them germinating, and I've had 1 or 2 come up sometimes and not any others. So this year I took matters into my own hands. I pre-sprouted them and then planted them out. And hopefully that means that I'm going to have a much bigger harvest of parsnips this coming winter. You recall that I brought home loads of strawberries from the allotment and I planted them out in winter, and you can see them here. Lots of green leaves, there are loads of plants in here, but growing amongst them is wild garlic. Oh no. So I recycled some soil from another part of the garden and I didn't realize that there were wild garlic bulbs in that soil. And so I need to come out here and start weeding these out. We've got plenty of wild garlic in other parts of the garden and all along the lane. So these need to come out because they will stifle the strawberries before they start dying down again. You can see already here the leaves are starting to go over the strawberry plants. Aside from these strawberry plants, I also have the bare root strawberries planted out. I got them in winter, put them into little pots, and then last week I planted them out in this bed. So there are 2 rows. There's El Santa nearest to us, and then on the other side there's Hanoi. And then this area over here, so all along here, I've put in some spinach. So I've direct sown some spinach. Now, I don't direct sow a lot of seeds. Mainly, I sow them into modules or trays like we did earlier. And if you do that, that means that you can keep a better eye on them. Whether it's in the house or the greenhouse or outside on your patio, you can make sure that they're protected from frost and from the elements and from birds and slugs. And I have a video describing exactly how I go through sowing all of my seeds in modules and the benefits of that. Now, back behind me, we're going to go through what else is growing back here and some more plants, including another seed that I pre-sprouted and then planted out. But I'm not going to go through the different herbs back there. I have dill, I've got coriander, cilantro, flatleaf parsley, all on the go, both in the greenhouse and in the house right now. So that's this year's crop of annual and biennial herbs. But I go through all of the perennial herbs that I have growing in the beds above me, and also some of the biennial ones like parsley in my last video, my Easter video. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about those herbs that are fantastic this time of the year for adding flavor, but also a little bit of life and color to your garden, you can watch that video next. Have you ever heard of a root vegetable called salsify? I've not grown it before, but I got a packet of seeds from the seed swap last year. They're a bit old, so I decided to pre-sprout them as well. And they had extremely good germination. I think every single one germinated. And I've planted them out here. They're quite close together because I wasn't sure if they would survive, but they might do, and I might have to thin them out. They're called the oyster vegetable because the roots, the long, thin roots, supposedly taste a bit like oysters. And so I'm curious to see how they grow, and I'm curious to see how they taste. I have a lone purple sprouting broccoli plant at the bottom of this bed, and it was actually an afterthought just plonking it in here. And we have been picking a lot off of it. You can see all around there. But up here in this top bed, there are a couple more plants, and they have just started producing. And I've taken the main central floret off, and you can see all around that there are new ones starting to come out, and probably more down here as well. This plant over here, oh yeah. So this is purple sprouting broccoli. I'll pick one so you can have a look. This is one of those fantastic crops this time of the year that really keeps your bellies full and is just so delicious. And if you buy it in the shop, it is so much more expensive than growing your own, and you get so much off of a single plant. Just look at that. You might not recognize these 2 plants at the bottom of this bed. These are cabbage that are starting to bolt. And before they bolt, before they start producing flowers rather, they produce these florets. And if you catch them before they start turning into flowers, you can pick them, just like the purple sprouting broccoli, and cook them in the same way. And they are delicious and tender. That stem, the florets, everything. And that's what we've been doing. And I need to come out here and make sure to pick all of these because they'll keep producing these until they're allowed to go to flower. Purple sprouting broccoli, cabbage, the brassica family, they all produce edible shoots or florets. And when they do flower, you can eat the flowers too. So we have some various brassicas here, Asian greens, radishes in here as well. And we can either leave these beautiful flowers for bees and pollinators to get food from, or put them on our salads. They're actually really, really tasty. And so if you do have brassicas that bolt and go to seed, know that you can eat those florets and you can eat the flowers too. If you recall, I've had the end of this bed covered in a fleece tunnel all winter long. There's some chard here closest to us, growing strong and healthy. And then on the other side, I've got lettuces. These are lettuces that I sowed at the end of last summer. And because they've had protection, they have done well through the winter and they're starting to grow. And this means that I've got an early harvest of lettuce out here in the garden. It's not in the polycrub, just under fleece, and it looks so lush and green. So tasty. This is something really good to know if you are working with an outdoor space and you have a relatively temperate winter. You can cover up the plants, and that way you'll have an early start on spring greens. That should be enough. I've put about 3 inches of peat-free compost at the bottom of this bucket, and I've got a Cara seed potato. I've not grown Cara before. It's not really known for its tastiness, to be honest, but it is a type that is being used for a local potato growing competition. You can only use one seed potato, this particular style of trug, and at the end of the summer, everyone brings their potatoes in and they get weighed, and the person that has the most potatoes by weight wins. Now, I don't think that I'll win because there are, I think, quite a few veterans that really focus on winning the top potato prize, but I'm going to give it a go because it's just a little bit of local fun. If you've not planted your potatoes yet and you're in the same zone as me, April is the time to do it. I have all of my potatoes in, obviously, planting this one now. And some of the other garden projects and tasks that I have planned for this month include preparing an asparagus bed. It won't be no dig because I don't have time to create a no dig bed for the asparagus, but the crowns are arriving this month. I'm also doing a bit of a renovation in front of the polycrub, and I have some epic gardening birdie raised beds. 2 of them are going to go there along with some plantings, and we're going to create a path. So that is a big project for this month. And of course, there are loads and loads of seeds to sow. You saw my seed sowing calendar earlier on. April is seed mania, seed and seedling mania. So I need to keep on top of my schedule so that I have lots and lots of different crops to go out in the garden. And then lastly, towards the end of this month, on April 22nd, is the annual seed swap and plant share here on the Isle of Man. And if you are local, you are invited. It's from 2 to 4 p.m. at the Laxey Institute in Laxey. And it is a fantastic event, and it's a great way to get a lot of seeds and a lot of plants for virtually nothing. So what am I doing with only a few inches of compost in this trug and this one seed potato? First of all, this seed potato is a Cara seed potato, and it is indeterminate, which means that if it is planted at the bottom of a container and you keep piling up compost on top of it, it will continue to grow and produce potatoes on all sides. So very similar to how an indeterminate tomato works as well. And the compost that I'm using, this is from a local producer of peat-free compost that I visited this week. And I hope to do a video with them very soon so that you can see how commercial compost is made, because it is fascinating and it all comes from green waste here on the Isle of Man. So that might be a video that I produce in the next couple of months. But as for this potato, I'm going to start it off in this compost. I might decide to add some manure and some other stuff in here as well. But planting it at first with just a few inches, letting it grow, and then keep adding more a little bit at a time maximizes how many potatoes I can get in this truck. That's the theory. And that's what people do when they grow potatoes in tall containers like bins, like rubbish bins, garbage cans. You have to choose an indeterminate potato type to make that happen. Now, April is a really busy time. Lots of seeds to be sown, lots of seedlings to be taken care of, lots of things to do in the garden. But if you have a little bit of extra time this weekend and you want to do something special for Easter, I have an idea for you. This week, I naturally dyed eggs using plants from the garden, and also supermarket veg as well. And spices, I should mention spices, turmeric, paprika, you name it. So natural colors and a natural process that creates the most stunning colors on eggs. And I also have experimented with creating botanical impressions on the eggs as well. So these are things that I found in the garden. And if you would like to naturally dye some eggs on your own or with your children this weekend, head over to my website. I have full instructions on how to do it and all the types of vegetables and fruit and spices and herbs that you can use. Have a really lovely Easter, and I'll see you next time for another video here on Lovely Greens. Bye for now.